there are situations or there's periods in your life where you're going to feel like you're broken, where you're going to feel like you don't know what the next step is, where you're going to feel like you're questioning your ability to trust God. Now, that does not necessarily mean that your faith is broken. And that's the conversation I'd like us to have today. My name is Jane. Welcome to Make an Impression. I created this space because I want to help you, who is a woman of faith, and you're struggling with fear. Overcome it so that you can confidently walk in your God given abilities through faith and bold action. Let's dive into today's conversation. So, I would like to start today's conversation by reading the Bible in the book of Mark, chapter 9. I'm just going to go through the story. There's a story that we're going to go through, which is going to guide our conversation. And I want to start from verse 17. And one of the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a dumb spirit, and wherever it seizes him, it clashes him down, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able." And he answered them, "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, "How long has he had this?" And he said, "From childhood. And it has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have pity on us and help us." And Jesus said to him, "If you can, all things are possible to him who believes." Immediately, the father of the child cried out and said, "I believe, help my unbelief." Now, the reason why I've started with this story is because I want to encourage you. If you're probably feeling like you're in a space of doubt, where you've been doubting God, where you've been doubting if God is actually in your story, where you've been doubting if God knows what's happening in your life, if he's really present, because there's pressing needs and things that we go through that make us get to that point where we actually sit and say, "God, are you really in this thing?" And the reason why I started with this story is because I wanted you and I to know and to be encouraged that even in the Bible we see a man who came before God, and he was not actually doubting that Jesus was able to heal the son, but what he actually said is that let me just go back and see what it says. If you can do anything. Basically, he was pleading. He was like at a space where he was like, "God, whatever it is that you can do to just, change this situation, to just remove this burden that I have carried in my life for this long." And Jesus said, "If I can, no," and corrected him and said, "All things are possible to him who believes." But then we see the man saying, "I believe, help my unbelief." So I think for me, doubt is something that is very natural and very normal for us as Christians. I mean, there's also things that I ask of God and I actually doubt if he can give me. Why? Because I am measuring it to who I am or the level of where I am in this current world that I am living in. And so because of that doubt, I find myself, yes, praying to God, but also praying in the same way where I'm saying, "If you can do something for me, God, if you can remove this thing from me, God, if you can push away this problem, if you can deal with this situation." But then now I'm learning that God does not want us to come to him and say, "If you can." He wants us to believe that all things are possible for him who believes that God is able to do it for them. And so I think that being in doubt is normal. It's natural. I mean, it's very natural for us to believe that God is not able to do some things for us. But then now we see this man saying, "I believe, please help my unbelief." Because we are human, and our natural state, or our, the nature of humans is to look at things the way they are, look at the reality of what is happening right now. But then I am learning from this man that it's very important for us to come to God in that space where we are saying, sometimes I do really doubt you, God. Sometimes I doubt if you're in my situation. Sometimes I doubt if you actually are present. Sometimes I doubt if you're listening to my prayer, or if you're seeing how much of a problem this thing is for me. But as much as I doubt, all I'm saying is I believe you're able to change my story. I believe you're able to change this situation. Please help my unbelief. I think one of the ways that can help us, when we are in these moments of doubt, when we are doubting if God is able to do something for us, is to actually exercise our faith, because faith without action is dead. And for me, I think the action is exercising your faith in a way that you believe that God can do it, even if I'm not seeing the result right now, even if I don't know what the answer to this prayer will look like, even if I don't know what the end of this thing that I am doing will look like. I am saying that I believe and I am moving in faith. And moving in faith is really just doing something that you don't even know if it's going to bear fruit. You don't even know what you're doing. You're just moving to the next step. You're moving in obedience. You're just saying, you've called me to do this thing and I'm going to do it. That is what faith in action looks like. And I think as long as we are exercising our faith, then we learn to come to God and say, nevertheless, not your will, not my will, but your will be done. And I believe that all things are possible. So this thing might be looking impossible for me right now, getting the school fees for my kids, being able to survive a meal for tomorrow, being able to buy my children what they need, being able to get clothing, being able to just meet the daily needs, because things are hard. We are in a very difficult state right now. Everything is we're just moving by the next step, by the grace of God. And so it's very easy to think, what, I don't think God is present in my situation, because he wouldn't be letting this happen to me. But God is reminding us that even in our unbelief, we can say, I believe that you're able to get me out of this situation, but help my unbelief, because there's also a part of me that doubts if you're able to change my story. There's also a part of me that doubts if this situation can change. There's also a part of me that doubts if, I will be able to recover from this thing. There's also a part of me that doubts if there's a miracle that lies ahead. But as long as I am exercising my faith, and as long as I am staying in that space where I'm saying, I believe, dear God, but help my unbelief, so that I can continue moving in this space where I know you're able to perform this miracle, where I'm not just going to say, if you're able to do it, but I'm going to say, when you do it, because I believe it is going to happen at some point in my life. I think the second way in which we can help ourselves get rid of the doubt, or just work through our doubt, because it's not really getting rid of this doubt, it's just working through it, so that it does not become the thing that we focus on when we are walking on through our faith journey, is being able to remember the days and the places that God took you out of. I'm sure when you look through your life, there's a testimony, there's a time that God came through for you, there's a miracle that happened in your life. There's a time you were really trusting God for something and it came through. And those are the promises that we need to stay on. Those are the promises that we need to remember whenever we start doubting. Like for me, whenever I start doubting that God is able to do something for me, I have taught myself to look back. And every time I look back, I remember a situation that was more dire than what I am in. I remember a situation where I didn't know what to do and God came through. I remember a situation where I was literally down on the ground and God showed up. And every time I remember such things, I'm able to work through these doubts. I'm able to work through these doubts and tell myself, you know what, Jane, your faith is able. God is able. He was able to do it before. He will do it for you now. He was able to get you out of this situation. That time when it felt so heavy, that time when it felt so confusing, that time when it felt so demeaning, God was able to come through for you. And whenever I'm able to sit within those promises, whenever I'm able to sit and remember, you know what, there was a time that whatever is happening in my life right now, is a testimony. There was a time that, I was going through this test. There was a time I didn't know what to do. There was a time I was lost, but God found me, but God showed me the way. So every time I'm remembering these promises, even when I am in doubt, I am able to believe God can get me out of the situation that I am in. It doesn't mean that my faith is any less. It doesn't mean that, I'm not a qualified Christian or there's something wrong with me because I'm doubting God. No, it just means that even as heavy as this situation is, I am reminded that God took me out of something difficult before, and He's able to take me out of whatever it is that I am going through right now. Hey there, before we dive further into the video, I would like to introduce you to our Bold Faith and Authentic Identity workbook. This season for me has been about unlearning who I was told to be and rebuilding who I truly am, rooted, honest, and whole. Many of us were taught identities that sounded spiritual but slowly shrinked us. Be strong even when you're breaking. Stay quiet even when something is wrong. Carry it alone because God understands. But strong faith is in silent struggle, and obedience to God is in self-erasure. That's why I created this workbook. This workbook is not loud. It does not rush you. It does not demand answers you're not ready to give. It offers solace, understanding, and a safe place to rebuild your identity with God without silencing your story or minimizing your pain. It's not about revisiting the past in detail or forcing quick healing. It's about gently peeling back the layers of who you were told to be and rediscovering who you are beneath it all. My desire is that this will help you answer the question, who am I beneath the labels, expectations of others, and survival modes? Inside, you'll find reflective prompts to identify false identities formed through survival, faith-anchored exercises that invite honesty without shame, space to process, pray, and rebuild from a deeper place of truth, gentle guidance for women navigating transition, grief, clarity, or quiet courage. If you're in a season of unlearning, redefining, and choosing truth over endurance, this workbook was created with you in mind. Check out our website www.makeanimpression.org and grab yourself a copy. I do look forward to seeing the transformation that this workbook will do for you. I think the other thing is, don't allow yourself to stay in that place of disappointment for long. I think when I look, I'm speaking from my own personal experience. It's very easy for me right now, for what I'm going through, to choose to stay in that place of disappointment, to choose to stay in that state of, oh yeah, that state of, what is happening, I must have really wronged God, or things are so difficult, or I can't explain what is happening to me right now. But I have taught myself not to not to place my trust, or not to stay in that space of disappointment, because when I look around me, there are so many other things to thank God for. I have good health, there's other things that I can thank God for. There's food on my table, there's shoes on my feet. There's just little miracles that when I look around, I'm able to see that God is doing for me. So when I choose to focus on the things that I consider disappointment at this point in my life, then I am missing out on the blessings that God is already doing. And what does the devil do? The devil comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So he wants to make sure that you continue thinking about the disappointment. He wants to make sure that he steals your current joy. He wants to make sure that he kills that hope, that faith that you have in God. He wants to make sure that he destroys any sort of happiness and joy that should be around your life. But the Bible says that God came so that we may have life and have it in abundance. And every time I think about that, I think about the abundance of God. I think about the things that he has blessed me with, that I can thank him for now, because there's so many things to be grateful for. And I want to encourage you, if you're in the space of doubt, if you're in a space of confusion, if you're in a space of questioning if really God is present in your situation, I want you to take a moment, sit down, look around you, look at the things to be grateful for. There are people who are struggling. There are, these situations in this life that are really hard. But when you look around you, God has secured you from them all. You're not in the hospital, you're not sick. You're probably in the hospital, you're getting better. Like, I could go on and on of the very different situations and circumstances that we are going through right now in our lives. But I can promise you, when you take a moment to sit and look around you, you will see so many reasons to thank God. You will see Him working. You will see the miracles. You will see the abundance of the life that He's talking about. Because I have taught myself to not limit my mind to think that abundance is having money, abundance is having, things that we consider abundance materially, but there's an abundance of peace, there's an abundance of joy, there's an abundance of, presence, there's an abundance of things that are not tangible. You cannot touch them, but they are things that are very crucial and very important in this life as we are walking in this journey as Christians. And so I have taught myself to not dwell in the space of disappointment. Yes, I am going to cry about it. Yes, I'm going to go to God and say, I am really angry with this situation. I am offended. I don't want to forgive. I don't want to forget. I don't want to, there's just so much that I can sit on and talk about my disappointments to God. But I am learning to say, yet in this, God, you still remain faithful. Yet in this, I still see your abundance. Yet in this, I still see the goodness that you are doing in my life. Yet within this situation, I am peaceful. And I like that the Bible says that the kind of peace that God gives is beyond human understanding, because some things you can't comprehend. You can't comprehend, why am I so peaceful? Why is there so much peace around me while I am going through so much? It's because the kind of peace that God gives, it cannot be explained. It cannot be comprehended. And that's the thing that I want to dwell on. Yes, the enemy wants to come and steal. He wants to come and kill. He wants to come and to destroy. But you know what? When you dwell in that disappointment, that is when you're giving him the power to do that. But when you remind yourself, but Jesus came, He came that we may have life and have it abundantly. We may have life and have it in abundance. Then you start looking for the little joys, the little places and spaces in your life where God has placed abundance, where God is placing abundance, where God is doing exceedingly abundantly. Because when you focus on those things, what happened? You start having the courage to let go of your doubts, to start saying, well, I was actually doubting that God is able to do this. But now that I am looking at my situation and I am seeing that there is joy here, and I'm seeing that there is peace here, and I'm seeing that there is provision here, I do believe that even in this situation, as difficult as it is, God is definitely going to come through for me. So my encouragement to you this week is to look at yourself. Look at the spaces where you doubt God, and don't think of yourself any less, or don't think that there's a problem with you or your faith journey just because you doubt God is able to come through for your situation. What you do is look at that doubt, and now look at the things you need to do so that you can focus on the faithfulness of God, so that you can focus on trusting that He is able to turn your situation around. That has been it for today's conversation. I hope you have been blessed. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I do look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.